Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. It's Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Debra Asberry as we talk about women traveling together. It's time to go solo together. I can't wait to hear what you think about this episode. And our guest joining us today is Debra Asberry. Debra, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate the invitation.
And because we are business kindred spirits, and probably kindred spirits in other ways as well, which we'll talk about more and find out, could you start by just giving your formal introduction about, what organization you're with, and tell me a little bit about how the organization got started?
Sure. I am the president and founder of Women Traveling Together, and that is our official, business name. And what we are is, what we do is we provide tours for married and unmarried women with the means and the desire to travel, but who are tired of being dependent on others to travel, but they don't want to go alone. We've been in business for 20 years, and our specific focus is on meeting the needs of unaccompanied women who make up a very vibrant majority of our travelers. We keep our group size small so that we can learn everybody's name. We encourage interaction among the travelers before the tour. We send a professional tour guide with every trip. And we provide an enriching travel experience in a supportive and inclusive environment. And we offer about 70 tours. That's what we'll be doing in 2017, about 70 tours in destinations in the United States, Canada, and dozens of international countries. So that is who we are today. But what we were 20 years ago was a miserable me, sitting at home trying to figure out how I was going to go rafting on the Colorado River and find somebody that would go with me. And you may appreciate this. Most people do not consider a vacation where they risk their life and limb as being a good time. But it was something that I was very interested in doing. I had been an avid whitewater rafter. I'm a competitive swimmer from childhood, and I just have a love of the water. And to me, the ultimate trip was to do 10 days down the Colorado River through the heart of the Grand Canyon. To me, that was the pinnacle of accomplishment as far as travel was concerned. And I found myself in my late 30s still not having done that trip. And I had pestered my husband, my brothers, my father. Actually, I'd pestered anybody that listened to me, trying to convince them to take this trip with me. And I was dead set on not going by myself. I did not want to join, a preformed group of couples and people that were already traveling together.
Sure.
I wanted it. I wanted somebody there beside me that I had some modicum of a relationship with that I could turn to and say, "Oh my God, wasn't that incredible?"
Yeah.
So, unable to find somebody to travel with me, I just did the next thing that made sense to me, which was start a travel company.
Well, that's going to do it, isn't it?
Well, it took me 10 years to get enough, feeling like I had a large enough company that we could find 15 other women that wanted to do this trip. But we did the trip in 2007.
That's fantastic. And I love your story because you built it out of a very selfish need, but I mean that in the kindest way possible, because you knew exactly what was going to work for you and exactly what wasn't, and you were just persistent in advocating for that, and then eventually making it happen for you and others.
Well, I appreciate that. I tend to suffer from Onlyology, and it's a made-up word, of course, but I believe that I am the only person that has this need, these feelings. We all suffer from Onlyology. And I suffered from that when I was thinking about traveling and doing this particular trip, because when reaching out to people that were in my social circle and being told no constantly, I just made the assumption that I was the only person with this problem. But I do have an interesting story about how my opinion was changed.
I'd love to hear it.
And well, what happened, and this was truly a coincidental meeting of a woman who was spending some time with me just until another woman joined a meeting that we were participating in, having nothing to do with travel, my previous business life.
Sure.
And she related this story to me out of the blue about the fact that she had wanted to go on this cruise and nobody would go with her. She'd had 2 friends commit and back out at the last minute, and she just wanted to do this thing. And she had found a guy in a bar who had agreed to take this trip with her, had put his money down, and they were going in 2 weeks. And
Whoa.
I was just dumbfounded,
Whoa.
seriously, that she would do this. But on the other hand, I was just amazed that she had solved her problem and I hadn't managed to. And if the truth be known, if I could find a guy in a bar that would have agreed to go rafting with me, I probably would have taken him up too.
Fair enough.
So I couldn't really criticize her too terribly much. But it was that conversation that woke me up to the fact that, hey, maybe other people have this same problem, other women.
Yep.
And that, in truth, was why I started the company, because I realized, hey, if there's one of us out there, there's got to be more.
Absolutely. And clearly we're seeing the trend in the community growing by leaps and bounds. It is even my interest in this as a business, not as just something personal. That interest really started growing in 2015, and the trends are just continuing in this direction. And I think as we're going to continue to talk about that, other types of tour operators, if they don't recognize the value of working with solo travel, especially solo travel women, they're going to be missing out. And I love that you, a woman-owned business, is right there to catch up. And I'm not going to say pick up the scraps, because I really think that you're doing something that's more about leading the way and upsetting the norm. And I love that.
Well, I would say that we are the leader. And the reason I say that is because back in 1997, when we got started, your mainstream tour operators, they wanted nothing to do, and still most of them don't want anything to do with the solo traveler. It's not to say that solo travelers don't go with mainstream operators, but they are not, they're not their focus. And so they maybe will allocate 3 or 4 single rooms that the solo traveler has, and once those are sold, they're not taking any more solo travelers. They make no attempt to put the solo travelers together and build camaraderie between them. And I understand that. That is, they have a business focus they've had for years and years. When we got started 20 years ago, I just said, there's something that the female traveler who is coming solo needs specifically, and we're going to build a business around that need. Because if the truth be said, if you were coming with your friend, what do you need us for? You could just travel with anybody you wanted.
So what would you classify some of those needs as? And then how do you fill some of those needs for those solo women travelers?
Oh gosh, that list is believe it or not, it's a fairly long list, but I would say that the top thing, the first thing on the top of that list is that when we receive a reservation from a solo traveler, they look to us almost immediately as their travel partner, the person that if they've got questions, they can work it out with us. If they've got anxieties about where they're traveling to or what they need to do for reservations, preparing for the trip, we're their travel companion, if you want to look at it that way.
Sure.
And so we've had to staff accordingly because percentage-wise, we get a significantly higher number of questions and hand-holding than a traditional tour operator would. So, in fact, every one of our tours has what we call a tour manager. This person does not go on the trip with the women. Her job is strictly to be there to answer those questions and help them get prepared for their tour.
Got it.
So that would be, I would say, at the top of the list. We If you're traveling with a group that you've never been with before, maybe one of the things you'd like to be more comfortable about are who are these other 14 or 15 women that you're going to be going with. So we developed a part of our website that once you're on the tour, you can go in and actually meet your fellow travelers well in advance of the trip. That allows you the opportunity to plan free time that's built into the tours, and decide what you want to do at that free time, figure out what other people are interested in doing. Certainly we can do that while on tour, but if there are ticket issues that you need to get in advance, we make that available to the traveler.
Well, so one of the things that I think about is really necessary for a woman to embrace the solo travel life is having some sort of community around it. And what it sounds like you're doing, just by the very nature of how you have this set up, is you're at least giving people the opportunity, if they so choose, to become actually part of this community, and to the degree that they want to be a part of that community. So if you have similar interests, like I'm a scuba diver, and that's actually one of my biggest frustrations as a solo diver, is that I hate getting paired up with a buddy on the boat, because everybody has different abilities. And there's been one trip where I've left a buddy very frustrated because at the time I was a newer diver and I didn't have the skill set. And he came back and complained that we had to come up too early because I was out of air. So it was embarrassing. And then he wanted his money back from the outfitter. And it was such a frustrating experience. And yet if I knew that there's a possibility that if there is a diver, that person and I could have those conversations up front, and I would go into that type of situation so much more relaxed and not worried, because you don't want to have to worry about that stuff when you're diving.
That's very true. And I would take that same story and relate it to our situation. And let's just use as an example on a trip where we have a day kayaking experience that is open to every traveler, whether that's on that trip, obviously, whether she's ever been in a kayak or not. Mm-hmm. And so what we do with our tour leader, who is an employee of our company who goes on every tour that we offer, we send a tour leader. One of her jobs is to sit down and say, well, okay, who are the folks that have got the experience? Let's put those together. And those that don't have the experience, we're going to make sure that they get the support that they need in order to be comfortable and come back from that experience wanting to do it again, that it was a good experience. And so the women that have a lot of experience with kayaking are very supportive in that environment. And what's really neat about this is today it's kayaking, but tomorrow it's horseback riding, and maybe the person that was a great kayaker has never been on a horse. Yep. And so what ends up happening is that you have this very natural ebb and flow of individuals hooking up on the tour who have common interests, common skills, whatever, that so to support each other. And that in addition to that, you have the entire community of the group as a whole. What you get out of it at the end of the day or at the end of the week is people have bonded in little ways and very major ways. We've seen friendships come out of these tours. They're still together 20 years later. Yeah. That having met on that first tour, they end up traveling together over and over and over again on our tours and independently, just the two of them doing their own thing. The other thing I've seen and I've seen this plenty of time, is women who come on a tour. I want to be on this tour because we're seeing Prague, or we're doing a scuba diving trip. And then on the next trip, her interest is San Francisco and the Napa Valley and doing wine tasting. And she realizes how comfortable it is to integrate with a group of women that start out with a common interest in the destination. Yes. And she feels no need to hook up with anybody that she met on the previous trip. She just comes by herself. She knows that it's all good. She's done this before, and we see her come back again and again and again with complete freedom to pick whatever tour is of interest to her, knowing that she'll pick up her traveler traveling companions at the destination.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask if there had been some of that group mindset that comes out of it, where now it's like, oh, it's almost like that idea of let's recreate this experience, but in a different location. So, trying to get everybody coming back again. And you really just alleviated that question, because it sounds like there is some mindset things that are part of your regular customer base, that they're not only open to going on a trip solo, but with strangers, right? And to making new friends, but that they're open to then whatever those next experiences might bring, not necessarily trying to recreate the amazing experience that they just had.
Yes, that is absolutely true. There'll be that occasional, and really it is very occasional, where we'll see 4 women, let's say 3 or 4 women that went on an Italy trip that just so hit it off that we see them show up on something else. But those sorts of little clusters tend to fall apart fairly quickly, and it's just simply a matter of pressures, whether it's one of the 4 doesn't have the finances to travel as much as the other ones do, or the interests diverge, quite frankly.
Yep.
And that's understandable, and nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely. So, and I find a lot of people, their initial solo travel, while some do it with intention, I find there's a lot of people who are accidental solo travelers for the first time. And either they're just fed up and they're going to go alone for whatever reason, that somebody has canceled on them, or, their friends don't have the money, the time, and it's burning a hole in their pocket kind of thing. But it sounds like with this kind of group that you have space for everyone, whether they've been that accidental solo traveler, and you're creating an opportunity for them to have community. How do you work with people who maybe have that introverted spirit or that lone wolf spirit? How do they fit in the group? It sounds like you have some free time built in. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, I would say that the person who is the true lone wolf is probably never going to take one of our tours, or for that matter, any other scheduled tours.
Yep.
I'll start with that. But do we have introverted travelers? Sure, all the time. And so, again, we send a tour leader. Obviously, they handle logistics, but really their main job is group dynamics. And I've always said 15 women without a leader is chaos.
Amen.
And so if you think about it, her job is to get to know her travelers even before she comes on the tour, to the extent that she can learn through the information that we have them provide. But then from the very get-go of the tour, the opening group meeting on the first day, and as the tour progresses, starting to learn who these women are, what their comfort factor is with what they've done. Some women, hey, this is my 15th tour with you guys. Don't need any help here. I know the routine. But the newbies, right?
Yep.
This is all new territory for them. And so she is attentive to what their needs are, what they're looking for. Do you want downtime when we have free time? Absolutely. Go enjoy that. Do you want to go off with these other 3 and do museum hopping for the afternoon because that's what you're interested in? So she really works the crowd, so to speak, giving everybody the amount of attention equal to what their needs are. And we always like to talk about it in terms of the needs of the individual and the needs of the group, because they are not independent.
Right.
They are very dependent on each other. And so we adopted this philosophy from day one at the beginning of the company, because while you could easily hire a guide that, say, is a national guide from Italy, whose job is to tell you about all of the things about Italy, they are not going to care about the group dynamics, nor is that their job.
Right.
So what we did was we said, we'll send our tour leader to manage the group dynamics, but we're still going to hire the guide.
Sure.
To give the in-depth walking tour of Florence or whatever we happen to be doing, so that you get that best of both worlds here. And I really think that these new solo travelers are far more comfortable knowing that the group leadership is coming from a professionally trained guide who reports back to the company that they gave their money to.
Yes.
To go on this trip.
And there's like there's no stopgap. It's not this third party contractor who, this is direct. So it is a very, very impressive level of service. So what do you think is your biggest organizational success story when we're talking about our ladies traveling?
Biggest organizational success story. That's an excellent question. And what pops to my mind immediately is, we're going to offer 94 trips next year. And I consider that a success story because what we have discovered is that for the women that have been with us for years, and we have a woman that has 28 trips with us since 2000.
Wow.
Do the math.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And another one that's got 26, and another one that's got 18, and plenty that are in the double digits, 10, 14, whatever. But they have found a home with this organization, and they're constantly pushing us to be creative, to offer more opportunities, to think outside of the, outside and find things like how to take a Boston Cape Cod that everybody loves and change it up and make it a new experience. Hey, I'll rise to that occasion. I'll put it on the 2018 tour, sure. So we consider that to probably be our greatest accomplishment, is that we are something for everybody. It's a smorgasbord of choices out there. You like high adventure? Hey, I got that. You want a cityscape of New Orleans for 6 days and see the plantations and go do the swamp tour and eat great Cajun food? We got that too. And everything in between. We do a lot of national parks, a lot of everything. We just got back from Antarctica. So I wanted to create a home where somebody, and this is the if we are a good fit for you, not the other way around, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. If we're a good fit for you, then I wanted to make a home for you so that no matter what you wanted to do travel-wise, you can expect it's eventually going to show up on the schedule.
That's incredible. So I have to admit, Debra, that this is an unusual episode of the podcast that we're recording today. Typically, our podcast guests are those who have done a lot of solo travel, and there are some people who have a really strict definition of solo travel. So first, let me say, I'm not saying you haven't done a lot of solo travel, but what we've had the opportunity to do as we've had our conversations today is really dig into what your experiences have been as a woman owning a company that brings women together for solo travel. The challenge that we face in some ways is that there can be some very strict definitions of solo travel. And I want you and I to kind of work together for a moment to change the myth. And so some people would say it's only solo travel if you planned the whole thing by yourself, you're going by yourself, and probably you really shouldn't even interact with anybody. Now, I'm being a little bit sarcastic and extreme with that last part, because as many of us solo travelers know, when we travel solo, we're rarely alone, and instead we're more free to meet locals and enjoy rather than just engaging with the people who we came with. But there's a lot of other lines of thinking as it relates to this. And you were sharing a little bit with me before we got on air about what you guys are coining a new phrase. Would you share with us a little bit about that and your thoughts on how you define solo travel?
Yes, I will. So my definition of solo travel is the individual who is coming unaccompanied. You get on that airplane and you are going to go either do your own thing or connect with a tour. That to me is not important. It's the fact that you're doing it by yourself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do is we've got women who are not interested at all in going and doing their own thing. They don't want to plan the trip. They don't want to go by themselves and figure out the language, the transportation, the things that they want to see and do, and try to hook up with other people for their social aspect of their travel.
They don't want to do the work. They just want to have the fun.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right?
Yep. And there's nothing, I want to go on record and say that there is absolutely no judgment and nothing wrong with category number one, which is go totally by yourself, make your own plans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as a matter of fact, I did some of that years and years ago. It just isn't for me. I am such a social animal that I want the companionship, but my problem is I can't seem to find the companionship before I get on the airplane, so I'll take it after I get off.
Awesome.
And so what we have done as a company is really our focus is 100% the solo traveler. The woman that wants to do this but is tired of waiting for others in her life, whether to get their act together and come with her.
Yep.
And so on a typical tour with us, at least 80%, if not more, generally more, are coming solo. But then we travel together, right?
Yep.
So we have coined the term solo together because I think it very clearly articulates what we do. We come solo, but we travel together. And when we finish, we all go home separately.
I love it. I love it. It really, so solo together. Are you hashtagging that as well?
I have it as a hashtag on Twitter. It's my Twitter handle. As a matter of fact, if I ever use Twitter, I apologize, but I will give my age if you care to know this. I'm 59, and I haven't found a use for Twitter yet. But we do have a magazine that we put out. It's a 4-color, comes out 3 times a year, and the name of the magazine is Solo Together.
I love it. I love it. So solo together. And I will say, one of my things that I actually usually sign off with on these podcasts is remember that when you travel solo, you can go solo, but you're not alone. And you're only going to be as alone on any trip, whether you're on one of Debra's trips or whether you're on your own trip, you're only going to be as alone as you want to be. And it's really just up to us to make that choice and to decide whether we're going to engage or not.
I want to make a point here because you're 100% right. I have watched women come on our tours, and while it doesn't happen very often, it occasionally does. They'll come on a tour, and they won't engage with the other women. Interestingly enough, they'll go on the tour, they'll have a good time, but they're not making that social connection with the other women. And when they have free time, they'll go off and do their own thing. And what have we provided them? Safety, security, and all of the planning, one-stop shopping. But the companionship was not why they were participating in our tour. The vast majority obviously want to add companionship to that list of other benefits that I just gave you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I like to help people work through, because part of my group of people that I do work with are midlife women who are working through some of those messy transitions, whether it's empty nesting or divorce or grief and loss and things like that. And I believe that at midlife, we get an opportunity to start to shift our direction or get clarity on our direction for our next part of life. And one of the things that I spend some time working with people on is kind of your version of your story and how our story affects us. And this community that you're creating, Debra, it's something where I encourage people to actually find a safe way to practice their story. And it's not like I'm making up this secret life, but it's trying to put things in perspective. And you can only do that when you're surrounded by people who don't really know your whole story. And you get to sort of maybe change the way that you tell that story in a way that's comfortable and see how it's received. And doing that when you're traveling and having all these amazing adventures and changing your worldview or perspective a little bit as you get to see things allows that story to become like something new and exciting that you experience. And you get to decide, how you're going to share that story in the future. So my example of that is, the story of my breakup. It's not a great story. And I've worked through a lot to share that in a way that doesn't bring up all the emotion, but still is a relevant part of where I'm going. Well, part of the way that I've been able to share that story now is that I've practiced telling it. And if I practice telling that story to people who know too much, like my family and my friends, they will have their impression of that story. However, if I'm out telling it to people who don't know all that history, then all of a sudden I get to become much more comfortable and change the way that I'm actually engaging with that story and change that level of emotion. So that's one of the amazing things that I can see be a benefit from having that built-in community that you're referring to, that are going to be spending some time together and having shared experiences. It's a whole different level of support and community, and it's not of people who have necessarily like an obligation to you in the future.
And do you know something that is one of the most freeing things about doing this? And I can speak to this from personal experience because I've got baggage too, don't we all, right?
Yep.
And when I go on these tours, whether it's as the tour leader, as the company owner, or just a traveler, because occasionally I get that wonderful opportunity to just be a traveler. And I get to go on that tour and say, when they ask me what I do for a living, well, I work in travel. I don't even finish the sentence. I work in travel.
Right.
And I get the opportunity, are you married or divorced, to say, well, I've had a partner for many, many years, and I stop it at that. He and I have chosen not to get married. And I can share as little or as much as I want. And the great thing is that when I do pick the tours that I want to go on, they're generally tours that are really all about things that so excite me. In my particular case, it's something having to do with water, whether we're kayaking or rafting and whatnot. But I enjoy so many other things in my life. But when I'm on a tour that's all about water and rafting, that's really all I want to share with people is about my love for water and rafting. And guess what? That's why they're on this tour too.
Yep.
And then as I get to know some of these women, because truthfully, you may be on a tour with 15 other women, but you're really going to share deeper stories with only a handful of them.
Yes.
And that's great too, that you get to sort of make that, you get to pick.
Yes.
Who you want to share your stories with and who you just want to be, surface, and we'll move on from there. And it doesn't affect the group dynamics, doesn't hurt anything. You don't have to be like an open book to everybody. It's very liberating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think you have a pretty amazing model. And as I've looked more into your website and the work that you guys do, it seems like you have the tour leader position is a very coveted position. What are some of the qualities that you look for in a tour leader? Because I can tell you that not only would my audience right now be thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait to find out more how I can find Debra and how I can find out more about this organization because I want to check out one of those 94 trips coming up in the next year. But I think some of them would say, maybe this is where I'm supposed to be for this next part of my life. And I wonder if she needs more trip leaders.
Well, we do formal tour leader training, and we offer it periodically, and it just so happens that it's on the list for 2018. It is by application only, and what we are looking for are individuals that have demonstrated leadership skills. Does not necessarily have to be in prior experience as a tour leader, because I think life as we have lived it provides many opportunities for leadership. So I do not put a kind of a box around that word and spell it out for you. If you have leadership in your life and you have a calling, that's the other thing that's important here, is because there's no job tougher than being a tour leader. I can say that unequivocally, because you have 15 people whose job it is to keep safe, to keep informed, to keep excited. and occasionally to play mother and to break up a fight. And I don't mean a physical fight,
Sure.
but, you know, every now and then disagreements come up. Two roommates can't get along for whatever reason, and you need to solve those problems. And quite frankly, there's nothing perfect about travel. Something may come up and you, the tour leader, have to solve that problem in the background, and you can't let them see you sweat.
Right.
So these are all very important attributes for the tour leader. As the instructor for our training classes, one of the first things I say is, if you're here because you're looking for a free vacation, this is not a free vacation. Oh my gosh. It is work, and it is a calling. That's probably the most important thing I want to say, is it's a calling, because my tour leaders, their main goal is to make sure that the traveler has, you know, such a wonderful experience, and they're given the latitude to make that happen, that she wants to come back and do this again, and
Absolutely.
she wants to tell all of her friends.
Yep. I mean, they're really your frontline people you have one person back in the office who's handling some of that anxiety pre-trip, but once they're on the trip, those tour leaders are your front line of ensuring a quality and safe experience.
Yes, and they're responsible for taking my vision and interpreting it and implementing it. Most of the women that travel with this company will never meet me.
Sure.
But they're sure going to meet one of those 29 tour leaders eventually.
Absolutely. So as we're getting close to wrapping things up, Debra, you just mentioned something about your vision, and you have built an amazing organization. An organization like this, how many employees do you have?
We have 12 employees that work in the office. Everybody on the company is part-time because we very much believe in work-life balance. With the exception of myself and one other person. And then we have 29 tour leaders that work for us that, obviously pick up 2-3 tours a year for us.
Absolutely. So as you think about your vision for the future of your organization, what is that vision?
Well, you used a word when we were talking before we started the recording about normalizing the understanding, and I'm paraphrasing, I might not get this exactly right, but normalizing that whole concept of what is solo traveler and making it a normal thing. Because so many people feel like it is about the single woman that's so desperate because she can't find anybody to travel with her that she's going to go solo. And that is so far from the truth, as we have demonstrated here, and as I am sure you have demonstrated in other podcasts that you have recorded. Absolutely. So my vision for the future is to continue to talk about that, to talk to women who call into this office, who I meet in ways like this on a podcast, who I do speaking presentations for, and to encourage them to see this as something normal, to understand that it's a choice out there, and that there's no reason to sit home just wishing and hoping things can change. I mean, you're in charge of your destiny here. Take it, run, and go to those places that you've always want to go to. That, for us, is really what we want to continue to do. And we want to make that number of 94 tours become 100 or 120. And we want to continue to grow that community, because at the end of the day, this is a numbers game. Yes. I've got to have so many thousands of women who have, an interest in this particular trip, can go on these dates and can afford it. And so the more women that know about this organization means that we can offer more tours, that we can really get outside of the box and try and experiment with different things in terms of, we were just talking about one the other day. We're seriously talking about doing a destination week where, as an example, we go down to the Virgin Islands to a resort down there, and it's just a week where you know that the other people that went with you are equally interested in coming to this resort, enjoying beach time, whatever the amenities are, etc. But you're not having to go to that resort by yourself.
I cannot wait till you put that out there. I will share that with every woman I know to get a whole group of traveling solo traveler women together just to enjoy this. Can you imagine the stories that would be shared on that trip?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the stories that are shared on any trip. I really don't think, if you remove the destination out of the equation, you are still left with 15 exciting, interesting, motivated women that want to build a new chapter and a new story in their lives, and they're doing it together. And there's nothing more magical than that, in my opinion.
I would say that is probably the best way that we can wrap up this podcast, Debra. I mean, it is magical, and bringing these people together so they can go solo together is a magical thing that you've done. And this is a business that you've had in place for a long time. It's sustainable. It's run by women. It's for women. This is all things that I'm about, and I'm so glad that you were able to share it with us today. I would love to make sure that people know how they can find you. So make sure you share with everybody. Where's the best place to find you and connect?
Okay, so the company name again is Women Traveling Together. But if you want to find us on the web, our web address is just simply the two words, womentraveling.com.
Okay.
And that'll take you to our website, and the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory from there. If anybody wants to give us a phone call, we are at 1-800-795-7135, and our offices are in Maryland. And the other thing I'd like to extend to the listeners is that we are doing our 20th anniversary in November of 2017. We're going to be in New Orleans for 4 or 5 days, and we're calling it Celebration in New Orleans. And it's open to people who have traveled with us before as somewhat of a reunion, but it's also open to new people who have never done anything like this. Maybe it's a little intimidating to get on an airplane and fly to, Italy and meet people for the first time. So here's a great opportunity for relatively little cost to come meet the leadership of the company, meet our tour leaders, meet travelers, just get a good taste of what you're getting yourself into, and we would welcome you and love to have you learn about the organization that way as well.
That's fantastic. And this is all out on the website because I'm out there right now making sure that I can figure out if I'm going to be able to make it down to New Orleans. New Orleans is one of my favorite cities in the world, and it looks like you have a great destination event planned for the celebration. 20 years in business is quite something to be proud of. Debra, I can't thank you enough for not only sharing your time with me today, but sharing your passion for solo travel with our listeners and providing a resource for them so that if they are considering solo travel and they want to go with a community of supportive women, that it's there for them and they don't have to worry about bringing a friend or making sure their friend has time off or money. It's one of the best forms of self-care. Take that time for yourself and go travel solo and make sure that you're checking out Women Traveling Together.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I really appreciate Debra taking the time to share her stories with us today. I know that my exposure to Women Traveling Together was new. I've seen the concept, but I didn't know that there was a whole business around it that has spent 20 years making this happen. And now they're going to be celebrating their anniversary and leading 94 tours in 2018. I can't help but be really excited about what opportunity this might bring for people who are hesitant about solo travel, still want to travel with a sisterhood, and want to make sure that they're doing it in a safe, supported environment. Sounds like the perfect solution. I'm thrilled that we got to hear that from Debra herself today. Remember, the conversation doesn't have to end there. You can go to www.transformviatravel.com. You can join the Go Solo Sisterhood Facebook community to share your thoughts. Also, please follow us on Twitter. We just started on Twitter at Go Solo Live. no spaces. And please, if you like what you've heard, invite your friends to listen to Go Solo Live. If you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me directly at jennifer@transformviatravel.com. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.